Hoş geldiniz. Bugün yine Boğaziçi Üniversitesi sinema açısından tarihinden bir tanesini daha yaşıyor. Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nin 150. yılını kutluyoruz. Her sene buradaki öğrencilerimiz bilir, İstanbul Film Festivali ile işbirliğiyle önemli bir yönetmeni burada ağırlarız. Söyleşiler düzenleriz. Bu seneki konuğumuz da önemli bir yönetmen, Weir. Moderatörümüzü ben tanıtacağım. Ardından da moderatörümüz Sinema zaten size Weir hakkında bilgi verecek. Söyleşimiz İngilizce olacak. Tamamen dolayısıyla kulaklık almışlar varsa aşağıda simultane çeviri için kulaklıklar var. Moderatörümüz Esin Küçük tarafından, kendisi burada birçok kez burada oturdu. Türkiye'nin önemli sinema yazarlarından çok teşekkür ediyoruz kendisine.
Kulaklık yansıtmaları bir ikram ediyor muyuz? I'm so sorry, starting with the... yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have great honor and pleasure of having Mr. Peter Weir here. I'm so honored, really, that I'm a little bit shaky, so I appreciate, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Peter Weir is here for the Istanbul International Film Festival. Actually, I'll make a very short introduction. As you know, he's considered to be one of the leading figures of Australian New Wave, and he studied arts and law. But I work at television, but his major breakthroughs were Picnic at Hanging Rock, 1975, and the Gallipoli, 1981, which were considered to be key works of Australian film renaissance. As we know very well, his Hollywood productions reached wider audience and critically acclaimed. Witness, That Point Society, Green Card, Truman Show, of course, Master and Commander, Far Side of the World, all which were nominated to Oscar. So actually what I think, if you don't mind me saying that, is you always make me feel like ultimately uplifted if you tell a tragic story. And I appreciate your filmmaking. I'm sure you have many questions to ask, but I'll begin with a couple of questions to reveal your backgrounds, how you start, how was the atmosphere, how was the energy back in those days you started cinema, in Australia?
Well, firstly, let me say, is this one maybe not working?
Maybe,
Yeah, firstly, let me say what a pleasure it is to be here. I mean, for any, not just filmmaker, but any one creative person, artistic type, to come to this city and this country is such a mysterious country, is very, very inspiring. And just walking the streets, and I was saying I'm going to Cars after having read Mr. Pamuk's book. It intrigued me, the city and to see Ani. But anyway, that's getting off the subject. So my start was really not a kid with a camera. I was just an ordinary kid. But I had one advantage, I think, that helps me to be sitting here today, and that was boredom. Because in my youth, before television, I was 12 when television came. So there were long, long days and nights. And you were always told in those days to get outside. Your mother would say, go outside, don't hang around the house. So you could wander, and we lived near Sydney Harbour. So I would go down and watch the crabs and throw rocks at them and make up games. And of course, for the imagination, I think it's kind of essential to be bored. And we're in a very different situation today with children. Coming up here in Sydney at the airport, in front of me at customs was a woman with a child, maybe one, tiny, still in the little chair, watching a movie on this little screen as he was going into the airport. And I thought, what is that going to do to the creative side of that child? We don't know. We have to wait till they grow up. Maybe nothing. Maybe no problem. But So I grew up in that city in Sydney, full of dreams. My influences would be books, Robert Louis Stevenson, younger Enid Blyton, war stories, anything to do with the war. Because I was growing up, my parents' generation were wartime people. And I think from that war, the Second World War and the First World War in a way, a whole cloud of poison really came off the battlefields and spread around the world. And if you were sensitive, you could smell it and you could feel it like a secret. And I got onto the artifacts very quickly. If you went to a neighbour's garage, you knew had been a soldier or airman. In their garage, when they had the car out cleaning on Sunday, I would often just throw a ball that would go into the garage and say, can I go and get my ball? Because in there you could maybe find a Japanese helmet, you know, or a rifle, or a bayonet or something, a souvenir from the war. So when I wasn't doing that, I was at the movies. Like all kids then, pre-television, it was Saturday afternoon at the movies, mostly American and some English horror films. I love the Hammer horror. So these were the kind of influences, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was 20. I was a very bad student at school, hopeless, failing everything, bad at university, and so I started work and then went to Europe on a ship, which was a cheap way to go then. 5 weeks from Sydney to Piraeus, and that trip was a life-changing journey that made me decide to get into show business, really. Because on the ship there was no entertainment. The ship was due for a refit, and when I discovered when a ship's due for a refit, the crew are going to be scattered to other ships, and so there's a lack of I don't know, morale or lack of interest in the job. So they didn't have anything, just crossing the line ceremony. So we asked two other guys, young Australians I met, we said, can we put on a show? Can we do a sketch comedy review? Yes, they said. So we did that, and then found on the top deck, this is 1965, they had a small television studio, which just had one camera and went to the bars, just the bars. 700 people on board, a captive audience in the Indian Ocean. So we went to the purser and said, yeah, it's like Mickey Rooney, you know, hey, can we put on a show? You know? And he said, what do you mean? What show? And so we put on an interview show with comedy characters who were supposedly guests on the ship. And so by the time I got off the ship in Greece, as I say, a young man, the life ahead of him, I knew I would never go back to the job I'd had, which was in real estate, but that it was going to be a life as an entertainer. I didn't know what, writer, actor, I didn't know. Not film, I didn't think.
Wow, that's really amazing. So, so when you started to make a movie, did you feel like you are just exploring the world? Did you have
yeah.
how was the feeling?
Well, I must say the government had started, when I came back from Europe in 1966, I was full of wanting to perform. And so we did little sketch reviews. I don't know if that word works here. There were review, the little series of comedy sketches. And so I would do that while working in a television station as a stagehand, to the despair of my parents. And I got married. So I was 21, no money, married, and wanting to go into show business.
Too young to do.
They were so sad, so unhappy that I'd thrown my life away instead of going into Dad's businesses with the real estate. And so I did then the funds had just started, the government started the short film fund, hoping one day we could make feature films. and I applied for some money after I'd made a couple without using them, but I started short films. But I didn't care if I was, they said, what do you want? You're the director, to put on the title, the first film. You put down producer. And I said, it's just a word, what does it matter? They said, no, you're the director. I said, okay, call me that. And I was in the film, acting in it. So I didn't know if it'd be acting or writing, or maybe directing. And so I tried them all and found that I had a more natural feeling for the directing.
Wow. May I just go straight, then we can go back to other issues, but I am fascinated by your fascination about war, you know, things and that. And you have movies, but while we are very near to Gallipoli, I mean, what was the, you know, the core that you are drawn to the story? Because it's not all about war. It's
I wasn't drawn to. I'd loved All Quiet on the Western Front. You know, I was seeing a lot of movies. When I came here in '76, I was on my way to London to open Picnic at Hanging Rock. So I'd made 2 films. And I was inspired by All Quiet on the Western Front, and thought maybe I'd make something about the Australians in France fighting. And a friend said, why not Gallipoli? And I said, well, it was a defeat, and we did it at school, and it was always just too sacred, and you know, something, I didn't like it. And but I thought I'll go have a look. So I went there. Now in 1976, the battlefield was not like it is today, as you would probably know if you know the area. The graves were there, but nothing else except some soldiers, a couple of soldiers here and there. It was a military area. Very few Australians ever went to see it so far. So I went down, it was a day like this, and I thought I'll swim in the water like the soldiers did, and then walk up Shrapnel Gully, an area they fought, and I knew where it was roughly from a book. And so that's what I did. It was beautiful, not one person around. Swam in the water and thought, I wonder if you were under the water, if the shrapnel came down, it would turn into little harmless metal pieces by the force of the water. So that was the first thought for the film, really. But not really. I wasn't still not interested. I just liked being in Turkey. So then I wandered up at the gully. And that's when the strange thing happened. I began to feel I was being watched. I thought it was the soldier I'd seen earlier. Maybe this was, you're not meant to go there, you know. So I looked up above me, to the height, and said, you know, hello, hello, you know, nothing. Kept walking. And then all the back of the neck, I felt that feeling, there are people here. Anyway, it's a ghost story, really. And so I found myself saying, my name is Peter Weir, I'm a film director, loud like that. And I'm walking, and I thought, this is like I'm crazy, man. And then I said, show me your things. I don't know why I said that, show me your things. And I turned a corner, and there they were. A bottle, a boot shrunk down like a child's boot from the sun, a knife, a water bottle. These were the artifacts of these men. And I thought, I've got to, and I said, I'll make a film about you. This doesn't happen to, you know, this was a rare experience in my life. I'm not one who, you know, has stories of UFOs or something. You know, I mean, this was, if you're sensitive to place, I think you can feel when particularly tragedy has occurred. A lot of young men dying on both sides in this spot before their time leaves a kind of energy,
exactly.
I think.
I agree with you. If you go back to the new wave back in Australia, do you think how this era affected today's Australian plenty of productions. Do you think it was the result of today, or how do you compare? Because I think once you said it's like we were Europeans at the end of the bottom of the world,
It's true, yeah.
So as a new colony, we were not, it wasn't the priority to establish the art or something.
That's very true. It was the generation ahead of me, my parents' generation, always went to London. If you had artistic aspirations, painter, writer, you went to London. And you lived your life out there as an expatriate, because there was not a cultured, in Australia, really cultured world. And our history was so recent, and we were, I think, and probably to a degree still are, but less so, very unconfident. We were, in a way, deracinated Europeans. We were orphans, in a way, the whole country. Because when you chose to go to Australia, or you didn't choose, for convicts, when you got there, it was nearly 6 months by sea, 5 months maybe. If you were going to make a life, I've always thought, if I was in England in the late early 19th century, and you had a choice, you could go from Portsmouth to New York, or Portsmouth to Sydney. If you go to New York, it's 5 or 6 weeks. You go to Australia, 5 months. So I think the ones who chose 5 months didn't plan on going back. Or they had a secret, or they were in trouble. Or they were adventurers. I mean, of the convicts, it was like 150,000 were sent to Australia. 5% went back, because they made it attractive for them. They gave them land when they finished their sentence. The idea of the British government was very clever, was to try and get rid of the criminal class by giving them something, just saying more or less in parenthesis, don't come back, So here you had a generation that had got themselves up on their feet when along comes the First World War, then the Depression, then the Second World War. They're very difficult things for these grandparents and parents of mine. So when my generation came along, it was a peacetime generation, 1950s. And we were the first ones, I think, who could take a breath. So when we went to Europe, we went back home as filmmakers, restaurants or shops or writers, and began to work at home rather than London. And it gave a certain confidence to everybody. It was the Vietnam War. There was a great amount of sort of energy released by that war. Alternative ways of doing things, all the cliches particularly you would know from America. But we had the same thing, demonstrations, we had troops in Vietnam and so forth. And so this was a period of incredible sort of creative outburst in that generation. A great time, a great spot to have been late 60s into the 70s. And that's true also to some extent in the Western world, in music and films. As we know, people can look back to the 70s with longing. Okay. And things are very different now, so it's very hard for me to comment on the situation today with the internet. It's just very different and very difficult for filmmakers today. But then they're born to that if they're young, so for me looking back it seems to be very difficult.
Right. Can I go a little bit more into your first movies? As you mentioned before, earlier, you talk about the feeling, the energy, if some tragedy happened, when you visit, field or something. And the earlier films, I feel some sense of mystery, some supernatural element actually. So there is like a picnic at the Hanging Rock and the last wave. So how would you go for that? Or am I? No. You're like a blind person feeling in the dark, which is exactly right with somebody's life or work. I mean, I think
don't you, that you first meet the cinema as a child. And as that child, the world is very mysterious, and you don't know about things. And you know, your parents guide you a bit, but you look out and it's scary but exciting, the world. And so that first film you see, the big screen, the actors moving around, it's full of wonder and not knowing quite what it is, like a dream on the screen. And I think you retain that. I think I retained it strongly. I think most filmmakers probably do. You love it, I think. Well, I do. There are many experiences you can have in a film. So I'm not saying there's only one type of experience. There's many experiences there are films. But I do like that kind of film where you're not sure where you are and where it's going to go. It's unpredictable and it has tension. A tension, you know, between a man and a woman, or between, you know, created by anything. And I think that gives you a kind of contact to that child that is still inside of you. And you detour around cynicism and the blows of life. And you can once again be in a strange land. And so that's what I think some of those films reflected. And I still enjoy that when it occasionally happens in life. Again, I come back to coming to this country, to some extent to this country, as an English speaker, non-Turkish speaker. It's like that a bit. Yeah, even in a city. You turn a corner and suddenly you're in a different time. And you don't know the rules there. You don't feel threatened, which of course doesn't make it enjoyable if you did. But
yeah. Okay. If I'll go to the Truman Show directly. Also, I have a sense, as I'm sure you know, most of the audience felt the same. As something, it's uncomfortable always. You know, it's something out there, something like, you know, happening, and we feel exactly the same as the character. So what's out there? Generally, just asking, not only Truman Show, but in your movies generally, there's always something beyond our control, if I may say.
Well, it just strikes me that you know, I don't think a lot about it. I mean, I think, I don't know for other directors, but for me, I think each film, I like it to be fresh, each story. I think I'm coming to it freshly. If there are two broad types of directors, I think Pauline Kael said this one time, you know, there is the director who is in a sense the film, that is a certain type of auteur stylist. And it doesn't matter much what the subject is, it's not about the plot. And it's the stylish filmmaker. You know, we can think of a number of examples. My kind of director, I think, is the one who serves the story. So that's neither is any merit, you know, but it's just my inclination is that I am a professional storyteller and I look for a good story and try and tell it so not to be about me, but about the story. And to be a little anonymous. And in fact, I once made a documentary way back, and it was a scene in Sydney with a Japanese potter, Shiga, his name was. And while we were waiting for the pots to cure, I sat there with him, talking, and we talked about art, you know, and art in the West and art in Japan, you know. And he said, well, of course, for us it was calligraphy and particularly pottery is our art. For you had painting, sculpture. But there are other great differences, because he said, we, as the potter, served a long apprenticeship and made only utilitarian objects, bowls and plates, cups, and didn't sign it. It wasn't about that person. In the West, the signature is very important, and the individual is very important. He claims with the decline of religion in the West, from the Renaissance on, and the Enlightenment, and the beginning of the fading of the church of the Middle Ages. He said, in Japan, we just make these pots, and every now and again the gods choose to touch your hands, and that is a work of art. But it's not in your control. And I thought this was a wonderful gift from him to me about how to view the cinema, that it really is an entertainment, and for working people and people of all ages, and they pay a lot of money and they go along. And the film will be, in a sense, thrown away. Yes, it's now DVD and so forth, but it's very hard to re-release a film. It's gone. And so I thought, well, I'll just keep working like that craftsman, like that potter. Even then, it takes you a lifetime to be a master. So it's a life study.
Wow, but still. True. So what is your basic principles? What is the making a film, like the process? It's like script writing or idea or... Three clear sections. The writing, or if you like, you could say inspiration, then writing attached, shooting, cutting, release. Each has their particular challenges and virtues. Writing is not costing any money. I think it's wonderful for directors to write. In a sense, we are writers, I think. And it's very good to write because, again, it doesn't cost anything. I think it's almost better to write than to shoot little digital films. I know today it's very tempting to say, to give the bright child who wants to be a director, a little camera. But maybe better to give them a pen. Right. Because the more you write, the better you become, and the more you read, the better you write. And I think it's very helpful anyway. When you're shooting, if you need a new scene, sometimes you just quickly say, well, we'll just quickly rewrite something. And so there's the writing stage. But even before you write, it's best... I love this Jean-Claude Carrière book he wrote about screenwriting. A Secret, something, I can't think of the title, but it's the best book on writing I've ever seen. And he talks about don't write anything down for a long time. He talks wonderfully about working with Buñuel. What an interesting chapter. But he says you just do talking. That's why it's good to have a writing partner. Talk and eat and drink and wander about and imagine and then start a little bit of writing. So the writing phase, writing is the painful side of writing is yesterday's work is so bad. When you wake up in the morning.
Last night it was great. Yeah, what happened? So you have, I find these very, very trying days. The danger is you can become too critical of your own work, I find, and you rip it up and you destroy it. So anyway, writing. Shooting is a little more obvious in the sense of you have a finite time and the pressures that involve, but I enjoy it mostly. The weather is the biggest challenge. I was fortunate as a young man to have a grant before I started feature films, to go to London and spend some time at Pinewood Studios watching shooting. And at that period, Hitchcock was shooting his first English film in many years, the Necktie Murder one. And so I took a letter and got on his set. And he was shooting in Covent Garden and then at Pinewood. And at Covent Garden, he was sitting out on the pavement of a building doing a quite complicated shot where he was tracking down some stairs and out into the street with the actors. So he was sitting in that canvas director's chair, just exactly as you see him in those photos. And I was always just trying not to be too close, but just to hear anything, anything he said. And finally he said, with all the people moving around, "Why are we waiting?" And the first assistant director, as the actors did, knelt by his chair. It was like that. So if that's your Hitchcock, I would always come over like this and like that, like a priest, and like a confession. And anyway, the AD knelt beside Mr. Hitchcock. "Why are we waiting?" And he said, "The sun, Mr. Hitchcock."
Wow.
And he looked up and there was no sun. And I thought, wow, even Alfred Hitchcock has to wait for the sun.
We are equal in this case, at least.
So the weather is one of the strange things that you have to cope with. It's really exactly what you want. The editing period, after you go through the first screening of your film, which you may have worked on for perhaps minimum 1 or 2 years, minimum, is what I just call it the rough cut blues now. There's a Peggy Lee song, Is That All There Is? She sings, is that all there is? 'Cause if that's all there is, I'll just keep dancing. Can it have come to this nothing? And you go away. You do whatever you do. It's best not to watch it on the big screen, for a start. And then you think, like, well, I'll take that out, and I'll take that out. That's where you begin, is to get rid of the real rubbish. And then somehow, once again, you're writing. And you can do such amazing things in editing and cutting. You never learn it. It's to cut from one person to another person, take 5 of the first person and take 2 of the second person, was so different to the experience of take 5 with take 3. What's happened? It's just the slight angle of the head of the other person or something, but going between those two, suddenly the scene starts to come alive. That's one small example, but I've come to relish it, to enjoy it, and shake my head at the mystery of the collision of images. Now we come to the hardest part, which is the release, and why it's so difficult, I think, of the interviews, festivals, publicity. There's some obvious reasons, but the real reason for me, I think, and I'm sure for others, is you've lost the power. You've lost the irradiating power that you accessed. I think to some degree you make a film in a kind of trance. You psych yourself up. I think you could shatter glass under certain circumstances. I think you can communicate without words. You're really very, very wired up. And then it goes. It has to go. You can't live with that. You can't call it down either. It has to come of its own. So it's gone. And it's just you again. And everything you say sounds just banal and, why did you shoot that? Well, it seemed a good idea. It's as if you've lost something, as if it's, because the film is no longer yours in one sense, it's gone, and so you just have to, fake it a bit, get through it, and others you want to be confident in front of the actors who are there and so on, but it's generally the hardest period. You can't wait to finish with it and move on to something else.
Well, must be difficult for a director. I was wondering if you improvise on the set. I mean, you're well prepared, as we know, but still.
Yes, I love that. I try and save a day or two concealed. I remember on Witness, we were shooting in this Amish farm that was meant to be Amish, and I was thinking, what are we not? What else would be happening? Because there's, it's editing. As a matter of fact, I thought of a short film once. I never made it, but the short film was going to be this, that a woman, you see her sending the kids to school and then saying goodbye to her husband. Then she's washing dishes and she looks worried. She looks very worried, frightened. And she makes a phone call. Then she drives to, as it turns out, a psychiatrist, and she gets the appointment. He says, what exactly is the problem? And she said, well, I feel I'm going mad. This morning I was feeding the kids, breakfast. Then suddenly I was at the sink. And then my husband was going to work. Then I was suddenly in the car. And now I'm here. But I don't know what happened in between. And he said, oh, that's very simple. You're being edited.
Great. Yes, it's really, thank you. So, right, if you, I wonder, it's sometimes you just tell stories that you make my mind a little bit like in Fearless. I admire your work, if you allow me to say. I was like an altered state. It's like something else that, you know, at the end of the word, I mean, end of the day, it's about love and fear. But how this such a project? It's like something else in your filmography. So how did it start? You know, you were.
It was fairly conventional in the sense of a script was sent to me, and then a book in galley form. I met the writer, and just made one big change in that. But you know, I did one thing in that I was fascinated with, an experiment. Well, it wasn't an experiment; it happened accidentally, actually. You know, when you photograph somebody, they're an actor. They're pretending to be whatever, you know, somebody. It's very hard to photograph their soul, as it were, the real person. You know, that's why you love those early photographs of native Indian people in America, children, any early camera shots where the people, I know they were told to be very still, but they don't project anything between them and the camera because they don't know what a camera really is, and they don't see it back, most of them. So you can stare at those faces, and they stare back at you. And the only other time I've seen this look of completely nothing between you and the lens, that person and the lens, is combat footage. And I saw some interesting combat footage during the Vietnam War that I never forgot, shot by a friend of mine. Australians were undertaking an operation. And so the first part of the film, 30-minute film, is the training exercise. So he goes with the troops through the trees in Vietnam, and the boys are walking with their guns. But you can see they're not looking at the camera, but they know they're being photographed. And they look like that. The second part of the film is the real operation. And the same faces can stare down the barrel of the lens, across the lens, and you are looking at a human being on the edge of extinction, or whatever you want to call it, but it's not fear or anything, it is they are not projecting something. And what I saw in those faces were what you would like to get from an actor on the set. And we're not allowed to have guns.
Then Fearless came.
So on the set of Fearless, Jeff Bridges had to nearly die. It's from a strangely sort of allergy. And he'd given so much to the film, put so much into it. We came to this day's shooting, and I set up a close-up after some more ordinary shots. In this state, he was ready to, he was going to die. And the shot was rolling, and I looked, my God, it's one of these moments, like a native Indian, like a child. My God, I can see him. And I thought, I won't say anything to him. It's too strange. But we shot through the rest of the day. Everything just went quiet. And we did these close-ups and whatever. Jeff left. Now Jeff Bridges, very strong, healthy man, Yeah. And next morning into work, and the phone call, they said, Jeff's not coming in. He suddenly fell seriously ill last night. And he was away for 4 or 5 days. Then he came back and he said, Peter, I'm sorry, that never happened to me before. And I think he lowered his immune system. I think he did something that created this look. He didn't intend to, I'm not saying consciously. But I still, if I see any of the film or if I fast forward, I can still look at that shot and think, that is like a holy grail to reach that for the actor and for the director to be honoured to photograph it. It's like photographing a baby.
Wow. It must be a miracle moment.
Yeah. I don't think I've had one like that since. Because you don't spend your life doing that. It's just happened sometimes, a rare thing. But there was a very powerful atmosphere on the set. So he had the context to do this, in a way, to access it. That was fascinating.
The Jeff Bridges actually also one of your that time he wasn't he was famous, but you picked it up. He was first choice of yours, or
no, it was going to be Mel Gibson was going to do
yeah.
it, and Mel was making his first film, and he said, "Look, if you wait for me," and I said, "No, I want to shoot," and he wanted to shoot his film. And then the studio wanted me to use Clint Eastwood, you know, and I said, well, I think he's too old. But he was working at Warner Brothers, and they said, well, so he's second, third marriage. Anyway, and I said, what about Jeff? And they said, commercially it doesn't make much sense. But if you can make it very cheaply, we'll set a figure, we'll go with you, which they did very kindly. Jeff now, of course, today is, you know, since the Coen Brothers film, and so he's a big star.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, also your casting choices, you know, be amazed by, like Robin Williams on That Point Society, you know, as a comic actor, then suddenly in a very dramatic role, or Harrison Ford in Fitness, or what else, many choices.
Jim Carrey actually
Jim
was.
Carrey in Truman Show, that was a huge impact on everybody. So how did you just reverse?
Well, firstly, those three men were looking for trouble. I mean, they wanted for different reasons to make a success outside their genre, as it were. And when you have a movie star who is willing to take a risk, it's very exciting. Because they already have some quality that made them a star. You know, they have a star quality. But usually they can be very conservative because they're protecting their, you know, their franchise, as it were. So when they go to take those risks, you know, you have a very exciting companion. And that was the case with those three men. And they felt reinvigorated, like they were starting over again, and when they were younger, and, you know, so... that was fun, and then you know, all of those ones are improvised. I mean, obviously Robin Williams and Jim Carrey were used to improvising. Harrison wasn't, and he was used to scripts. But I said I want to do some improvising on the farm, you know, and so we came up with some fun scenes. And we said, why don't you milk a cow? You don't have to write it; just go and milk one, you know. And then we did a breakfast scene where he talked about a TV commercial or something, and. I forget. Oh, dancing in the barn. Dancing. I said, what would you miss? Wouldn't you miss your music from your world? And he said, yes. And let's have a song. And he said, oh, I'd love to play the Sam Cooke song. Don't know much about history and so on. So we got that song. And I think, you know, in my experience, actors and the crew generally love it when they feel that the film is alive. I think if I was an architect, I would be the type of architect who didn't build many buildings but lived on site, or, you know, was there and was also kind of the builder. You know, you're not visiting, but you would be there every day. And because you just have these plans, but you'd put it there and say, no, the window is better there, I think. You know, or the window should be smaller, or no window, rather than just building the plans, so to speak. I'm sure architects don't just build plans, but I think that the feeling that this thing is really happening, it's not just a film, it's an experience we're recording, is very exciting, and wonderful things will happen, because then people will start to suggest things to you because they see you're alive to it, and the script is not some sort of sacred text. And they'll say, look, I saw this morning, you know, maybe you'd be interested. You know, I saw it's an old house, or it's a wrecked car, or it's a bridge fallen down or something, you know, and maybe you'll use it, maybe not, but everybody can then feel they can add to this growing thing, you know.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I have many questions, but I think I should, you know, open up to the audience a little bit, that I'm sure you have some questions. Do you? Sorularımız varsa hep birlikte alabiliriz. Artık sizi de tabii ki işin içine katmak isteriz. Sorusu olan var mı? Mikrofonlarımız da var burada. Şurada şöyle yaparsanız, evet.
Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed it. I love your work. You mentioned criticism of both externally and then internally. So I'm curious, like, how you work through that, or how do you take criticism and change it into a more positive part of your art?
Do you mean criticism from?
Both externally and then both your own internal criticism.
Well, yes. I mean, you have to protect the flame. I mean, the little flame of your inspiration. It's very small, I think, and can easily be extinguished. So you have to be very protective of it, so that anybody with the wrong kind of criticism could make it wave or even go out. So you have to choose carefully those around you, firstly, if we're talking about close to you. I think you need somebody you can talk to, and I have that. And I think in a way you absorb it through your skin. You know, somebody mightn't say it as a criticism, but going back to, again, you become so hypersensitive in this period of the creation of the film, that you say to somebody, I want you to, you know, I think instead of coming through the door, why don't you come through the window? And the actor one eyebrow might just flick, you know, and you say, you don't agree, you don't like that idea, you know, so you're picking things up, and then that person might say, well, don't I have a bad leg? And you say, yes, you're right, you can't come through the window, whatever, but I know that's not a very good example, but I'll just say, you have to, it's so natural to me now, I think, to select what I need and reject what I don't want, that, and I've made enough films to be able to not worry too much about that, but be open, yes. I think when you make a film, you have to have all the doors and windows open in your whole being, and because wonderful things come to you. And somehow, so you go onto some automatic clicks and helps you select. It's like two of you working on the film, the conscious you and the unconscious you.
It's a very vulnerable situation as well. At the same time. Evet, arkadaşlar yaparsınız. Teşekkürler.
By the way, again, thanks for coming here. I'm going to cut it short. What do you think about the idea of the concept of intellectual property rights? I mean, would you condone your movies being downloaded from the internet?
Yes, of course. Yes, I mean, like all filmmakers, it's you know, whenever I can sign anything or do anything that helps protect it, we're all helpless. With a generation that sees downloading and copyright theft or downloading movies and music as part of their rights, and they cannot think of the fact that people have to make them and be paid. So I'm not a big member of the movement, but I am concerned like anybody. It's a terrifying thing.
You mentioned, you know, God's touch on the artwork. So isn't it like you're not the only one who shoots the movie, but God involves, so you need to spread the word?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Say it in Turkish. No, sorry. Say it again. I'm sorry.
But isn't it like you're not the only one who shoots the movie? Why don't you let people see what you shoot for free?
Oh, for free. Oh, I see.
For free.
That's the whole idea.
Really get free part.
Well, you know, I mean, you know what my answer is, you know, because obviously we have to pay people and so forth. But what I did think coming here, strangely, today, was plenty of time to think in the traffic, that on certain underpasses or blank walls, I thought, I wonder if there could be you know how Banksy, the guy in England who does the graffiti, and everybody he's a mysterious man, he doesn't charge you. I thought it'd be interesting, a young filmmaker that would set up projection randomly around the city. Little small projectors concealed, you know, in a rubbish bin or something, that on the wall is playing a little short movie, so that would be free.
Evet, sorusu olan yine en arkada, size geleceğiz sonra arkadan.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us today. As a filmmaker, I wanted to ask you about the use of sound in your films, because especially with Master and Commander, I thought the soundscape was just brilliant in that film, and it seemed like you really went to great length, a lot of effort to really create the sound for that film. And yeah.
Well, I do love sound, of course. And Richard King did that track and he won the Academy Award, which rightly. But it goes back to my first film in 1966. It was a short film I made at work at Channel 7 TV studio, and they gave me I asked for some film stock and put it on at the Christmas review, 15 minutes long. The day of the review, we were at a theatre like this. We were live before first half. The second half was to be the film, and then more comedy sketches. So they had a screen they pulled down and projection up there, 16mm, black and white. I went to the laboratory to collect the film, and they said, sorry mate, we didn't have time to put the soundtrack on. I said, my God. You know, so I left it, I had a silent film. Now fortunately it was mostly narration, but with a lot of sound effects. So I straight away to the theatre, I went up to the box, I spoke to the projectionist. I said, this has happened, do you have a live mic and I can sit in the front row and do the narration? He said, yeah, okay. So they saved a seat there, and as the lights went down, I got into that seat with the mic. It went dark, and of course I didn't have a torch, I couldn't read the thing. So suddenly, just this mic and an image. So, you know, and alive, 300 people. So I said, it was cold that morning. His feet crunched on the gravel. So I did the whole film like, and the people sitting next to me were sort of, you know, because it sounded quite good, you know. So when I went back to work the next day, they said, now we'll do put your track on. I said, oh, well, I wanted to record it like this. So I recorded it at work in the same way. So that was sound, and man, I just love it. And I love silences. I love to see how quiet you can go, and the whole thing. I love Foley, and you know, I go down and see the Foley guys working, and do some myself. I just love it.
Wasn't there something about Master Commander where you guys had recorded in the desert, wind, or?
Oh yes, yeah, built a beautiful rig. Also, I've experimented a bit in Picnic at Hanging Rock, particularly where I had to create an atmosphere of unease because there was no solution to the mystery. So, optical track, of course, but we worked hard at putting an earthquake on it because it seemed to me a reasonable thought that all humans know what an earthquake sounds like or feels like. You certainly do here. But I think it's been imprinted somewhere in our genetic makeup. Other sounds too. A baby crying. You know, you can't ignore it. So we slowed the earthquake down and just had it just barely there, but maybe it's a subway in your theatre, or maybe it's a wind or something. It was an indescribable sound, and I was pleased later when some people would say, I would think it was it, they'd say, I don't know, during that film there were times where there wasn't much happening, but I felt the feeling of unease. And I often wondered if that was contributing. I think another sound, I tell you, I think is very powerful if you can use it without knowing what it is whispering. There's something about whispering that is the creepiest thing. You know? And, yeah, not any language, but just the two people whispering. It's creepy.
Ön tarafa alabilir miyiz? Ha, pardon. Buraya söz verdik, geri gelecek. Ön tarafa bayağı şöyle yaparsınız. Please.
Hello.
Hello there.
Thank you for coming here, and thank you for all these beautiful movies that you shot. Especially, I wanna make a comment actually. I really, whenever I see it from the show, at the end of the movie, I always cry. I can't help it. I always cry, and I cry terribly. I mean, and it just touches me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad because I intended.
Yeah.
No, but not all people will go that way. It wasn't. You didn't have to.
No.
It's there if you. It's there if you want.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful movie.
Thank you.
Better than the rest, I guess.
Thank you.
And and I wonder if you're planning to shoot a movie in Istanbul, because I'm really interested in working with you.
Are you professional?
I'm an actor. I also write.
You got a script?
Yeah.
Oh, fine. We can. That's all we need.
I'd rather act. Of course, I can write. I can do everything for you. Walk your dog and just.
I'll remember this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the microphone, people. They always work hard.
Yes, true.
Occasions. Teşekkürler. Mikrofonu taşıyan arkadaşlar tekrar.
My question is about improvisation. Okay. You come from Hollywood. I mean, what Hollywood sounds to me is everything is highly calculated, highly scheduled because of the production noises. So I really wonder how you can convince or how you can make improvisations in your shootings, especially you are shooting a high-budget project.
How I make them, how I get everybody, the actors, to do it, you mean?
And also, I guess maybe you have to convince the, I don't know, I'm just...
Producers.
Yes, yeah, maybe
Time and
producers,
money. Time and money-wise, how do you convince the producers?
Yes.
I don't tell them. I hide the day with my assistant director is hidden inside the schedule, secret. Like an emergency thing. And mostly we can protect it. Sometimes I've had to go to half a day, but I really protect it. But also before the shoot, I don't rehearse, but I sometimes have, on some films, Fearless, for example, I have a kind of improvisation rehearsals. Again, you know, it's very convenient if you have a couple living together or if you have something, and so I'll get them ad-libbing. We'll set up little situations. I'll have other actors telephone the house. You know, again, it goes back to my interest in what's not in the film. You know, scenes that are not going to be, are not written. What happened between this moment and that moment? So I've done it that way, and so I've said, and, you know, maybe it goes back to improvising myself on and review comedy, sketch comedy. And doing some acting then, you know, so we'll be in the little apartment or the kitchen or something. I like real spaces. I've had people cook food for each other if they're a married couple, you know, and they go shopping, you know, and things like that, to just, in the back of their mind, they've got some of this routine embedded, and it doesn't cost much, you just need a space that, and then I'll say, why don't we do something like yours feeling sick to one of them? You're home from work, sick, you know, and so sometimes nothing much happens. Sometimes we laugh a little bit, but again, I think you're communicating with each other, other than non-verbally. You're learning an immense amount about each other, and trust. And I think you have to have the trust that you can make a fool of yourself. Really, that's what I always say. There must be no embarrassment. You must be free to say anything, really, so that we can reach this this point. I sometimes say to you know, not like a lecture, but the idea is just out of your reach. The success is just past these fingertips. And we all need to all stretch to pull it down. It's not something I have. It's something that's in the room. And we need to work together to get it. It's in the air. And so it can create a very positive feeling toward let's improvise sometimes. I don't think improvisation is as good as good writing. Good writing is the best. Improvising is just the sauce or the spice, a spice.
That's a good example. Buraya, orada bitti mi sorunuz? Efendim? Mikrofon mu arızalandı?
Maybe I can hear, maybe we can.
And do you work with your actors before the shooting, or you leave everything fresh for the shooting day? I mean, before starting the shooting, do you rehearse before the film, or
rehearse?
I mean, working on scripts. I don't know, maybe with the main casting. Do you make a rehearsal before the shooting, or do you leave everything fresh on the shooting day?
Only on the shooting day. I really like all the props. I like the wardrobe. I like the sets. It becomes real. I think the best rehearsing is probably having dinner together. I love locations because we're all away together. But I like walking around the sets with the actors, real sets or real locations or sets. Talking about this, that and the other. I come back to, not hopefully to belabor the point, but that there is, the most work is being done unconsciously. And one can't comment much on it because it's too hard to, we can't measure it, but you need to break bread together more than rehearse, I think.
Önce öyle verelim, sonra arkaya
Tekrar hoş geldiniz diyeyim ben de. Sizi çok seviyorum. Oyuncuyum. Burada kaldığınız süre boyunca ve yani buraya gelmeden
I'm sorry,
önce de...
I'm not getting English.
Oh, you're not?
Is there a switcher?
Yeah.
Switcher?
İngilizce...
Say something in
Hoş
Turkish.
geldiniz tekrar. Gelir misiniz?
Is it you up there?
Acaba kulaksız...
Reveal yourself. Oh, you're in there. Look.
Kulaklık olmadan...
Channel. I think I just heard you.
Can you hear us now?
No.
Yes, got you. Good. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Hoş geldiniz tekrar. Çok seviyorum sizi. Gördüğünüz gibi çok şansımın yaver gittiği günler. Oyuncuyum ben de. Türk sinemasının ruhunu, Türk sinemasının yazarlarını, yönetmenlerini, oyuncularını nasıl gördüğünüzü çok merak ediyorum. Yani sizin şu ana kadar yaptıklarınızın üzerine bakış açınızla nasıl görünüyoruz? Teşekkür ederim.
Well, you know, I have a particular view about national cinema. I mean, I think the first film of a director is Turkish, as it were, if you're Turkish. You say, have you seen that new Turkish movie? No, what's that? You know, in Sydney. The second one and the third one, if they're good, have you seen the film of? You know, the filmmaker becomes the country. And that's the wonderful thing of film. You know, we say we lost it when we put sound on, you know, that it became divisive. I don't think it's true. You know, I think a good film, the nationality becomes of interest, but minor interest. And that's what art is. It's without boundaries, really. And sometimes, I don't know about you, I've seen a foreign film, you know, and I've said to my wife, maybe it was recently, a German film actually, and I said, remember when he turned and said to her, you know, how much he hated milk? You know, now I read it. I didn't hear it. I don't speak German. But it's all gone into the hopper, and it's come out that I did hear him speak. So I think sometimes we overemphasize this and make it a little more like the Olympic Games. I don't think, I think the films will outlive the borders. The world might look very different in the future, but the films will be the same if they're preserved. And I don't know your industry well enough to really comment. This visit, I'm increasingly curious to get to know your work more. But I'll be looking at you as a woman playing a part, not as a Turkish woman playing a part. That's, as I say, it's of interest, but you know, film is its own country. Yeah.
And here you're in international jury, so you don't have much chances in national productions. Evet, soru arkada hemen seviyoruz.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Would you go out on a date with me for tonight? Like a dinner maybe, because I'm an actress?
I'd be charmed to. I work every night, that's my job. I'm in the cinema every night.
Well, okay, there was a question. Oh, by the way, I'm an actress too.
A noble profession.
How do you work during the set? I mean, how do you direct your actors, in fact? Because
yes,
you don't rehearse with them before the movie. In fact, let's start from the casting. How do you decide, and on the sets, are you like,
you know,
this person, or...
Casting is the major thing, I think, because as we know with cinema, you know, unlike theatre, you really are, because of the close-up, which of course is the great invention of cinema. You know, we can have CGI, 3D, blah, blah, blah, colour, sound, but the great discovery was that. The face so big, you can see the movement in it, you can see the eyes, you know, and pick up all these little movements. So I think the casting, I often think of the casting as like I'm a detective looking for a missing person. The strange thing is that there are a number of people come in pretending to be that person. And they're lying, you know, and you have to find the real one. You know, I learnt early in my career not to serve a big cup of coffee, because you may know in 20 seconds the person's not right, but they're just blowing on their coffee and you don't want to hurry them away. So just little tiny cups of coffee. I think it's not so much what you say to each other or what scene you do. Again, I think you're like Aborigines or something, you're picking up all kinds of things about this person that's meeting you. Having been an actor, I'm very sympathetic to the actor or actress auditioning. It's a very awkward business. And I try every kind of way to make it not, you know, intimidating. I really find it a fascinating part of the casting. And to try and break the rules a bit, you know. The guy came in one day, I had a husband and a lover. It was a TV show, 2 men in this, not a lover, he was a husband, one was a plumber, and kind of dangerous guy. And in came somebody for the husband, and he said, okay, shall I start? And I said, why did you? He said, oh, no, nothing, forgive me. He said, I'm always the husband, never the plumber. And I said, well, I guess you have that look of sort of, and he said, I know, I look like the average guy, but you know. Okay, shall we start? And I said, well, do you want to read the plumber? He said, well, I'd love to. And he got the part. And it was a real lesson to me, because he wasn't predictable as a plumber. You know, he had some of these other qualities. So I keep that strongly in mind when I'm casting, to not just go down the well-worn, you know, tracks. But above all, you want someone with experience. We were talking about this together with the jury and I, weren't we, Sebastian? I think we were talking about it, but how last night, there's nothing like a trained professional. It's wonderful to work with somebody who brings their experience along.
Biraz tarafa gidelim. Evet.
Merhaba, ben Truman Show'u çekme amacınızla ilgili bir şey söyleyeceğim. Truman Show'u çekerken izleyicilere iletmek istediğiniz mesaj değildi. Sonuçta siz de ünlüler dünyasından bir insansınız. Kendi yaşadığınız eğlence sektörünün bir eleştiriydi. Yoksa insanlara siz çok sahte bir hayat yaşıyorsunuz demek amacıyla mıydı? Yoksa sadece farklı bir şey yapmış olmak için mi?
Well, you know, message. I really am not I'm very. I like stories. This story, written by Andrew Nichol, a New Zealand guy, was pregnant with metaphors. It was full of them. You know, so you took it. Imagine it like an object, not paper. You know, it had all these embedded with these little diamonds and precious stones. You know, and I'll just call them metaphors. And when you get a story that has got metaphors or a metaphor or something buried in it, best to leave it alone. Don't touch it. So this story of the Truman Show you could look at, apart from the obvious thing about a kind of satirical story about where television was heading, a satire, you know, a prophetic satire. There were all sorts of other things in it which are there to be seen if it's your interest or taste, or you know, you note them. But I've never set out to teach or to bring a message. I mentioned earlier I was a bad student at school, and when I mean that, I don't mean a naughty student. I just mean distracted. You know, not concentrating. I was sick a lot. I had asthma as a kid, and I was away a lot, and I missed a lot of stuff, you know. But I generally, except for one or two people, I was always on the wrong side of the teacher. And, you know, so I never really recovered from that. That's just prejudice. I don't like teachers. I don't really like preachers. I'm suspicious of it, really. So I began as an entertainer. So it's really, you know, propaganda movies are essentially the obvious message films, are propaganda films. And again, if you do propaganda or message type stuff, the unconscious shuts up. It'll have nothing to do with it, because you are using all of your conscious faculties to drive home the point of whatever it is, however worthy, you know. So I really just start off by wanting to tell this story. You know, I like the kind of riddle. You know, riddles are things we don't hear much anymore, but there used to be a period, I don't know when there was a period of riddles, maybe in the medieval times or something. It's in, you know, literature. And the riddle that this film was, I came to realize and put in words, which was, how does a man in prison not know he's in prison? And that was the riddle. The answer is to be born in prison, I think. And so this is what sort of thing interested me. Yeah. And how does he then come to realize he's in prison and escape? It's in a sense an escape story.
Yes, it's chilling, really. It's all about control. It's that you start to realize that you're in.
Yes. Do you know that I think it's in Germany now, I just read recently, they're inspired by the Truman Show. They're starting, or have built, an old folks' home, essentially, for people with Alzheimer's, I think, but in which they've created a village that's very unthreatening, and the houses are little houses in the village, and they're actors, you know, in the post office and the postman, and
really?
Yes, and people in the street selling newspapers. Good morning, you know, guten Morgen, you know, and so they live in this kind of little fantasy.
I mean, we do have Big Brothers. We did have
Big Brother, yes. Jan de Mol, in an interview, said, when did you see the Truman Show? They asked him. He said, yes, in 1998. And what did you think? The interviewer said, and he said, we better get a move on, we better hurry. And the Big Brother came out, and it was 2000, was it? Very close.
Yeah.
But he had plans. I'm not saying he took inspiration, you know, but he was heading, it was coming. which I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea.
And all those times, like 1997, Princess Diana's dad was like, you know, this paparazzi.
It was like a world event, yeah. Strange emotion, yes, very, very odd, uncomfortable, I thought.
Voyeurism everywhere. It's so it, you know,
a media event.
Yeah, media frenzy. Peki, pardon, hemen oraya verelim. Teşekkürler.
Hello, Mr. Weir.
Hi.
Well, it's an honor to meet you. In Istanbul, I'm an actor and a filmmaker like yourself.
Yes.
And one of my favorite film is yours, is
Thank you.
Not because I'm not complimenting you. It really is. I've seen probably more than 1,000 films, and this is one of the most emotional films I've ever seen. Even though I'm a Turk, Australian, so
we fought each other, yeah.
Yes, yeah, but as a human being, it's like one of the most emotional films I've ever seen, especially the final scene with the shots.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson is screaming. It makes me cry also every time I see the film. And it's also not a surprise to hear from you that you had a divine experience.
Yes, it's strange, very strange.
And I would like to, I'm curious about how the idea of telling the story through the eyes of two runners developed. It's very creative. And also, whether you shot the film with one camera.
We shot with one camera. Yeah, it was one camera era, you know. But one camera. But it really took 2 or 3 years to get the breakthrough on the concept. We were trying to tell too big a story. It had all sorts of other elements, and then there it was, one day, the way these things can happen. Official history, which we had always on the desk, of the Australians in the First World War. Very detailed book by a man who was there. That's what makes it a special history. He edited this book, but he was at the front line. He was at Gallipoli. And he described this attack at the neck, as it was called, in Turkish, I think, NEK. And he mentioned the young men from Western Australia going forward to their death, and he said amongst them was this one particular man, Willis or something, David Willis, going forward to his death like a runner at a foot race. And it was like, he's a runner, full of athletic ability, and he has to finally run to his death, you know, and that was then, without too much effort, was more the poignant loss of a human being. And from that point I decided to show very little blood, very little injuries to the soldiers. And some people criticised the film for that. They said it's kind of, you don't see what really terrible things happen when people are blown up or whatever. But I did it deliberately because I think it was Ingmar Bergman who said in a rare interview that you can do almost anything on the screen and the audience will suspend disbelief, but you can't kill someone. And that's rather true, I think. But I was, in the back of my mind, I thought, I want to try to give you the experience of somebody getting killed, and that you would feel a loss, just from, but they're actors in a movie, or an actor. So I made the movie back from that ending. I think I always like to really to have the ending, but you don't always. But I worked backwards from that to the front with the rewrites and things.
Thank you so much.
This gentleman's been very patient.
Şöyle bakıyorsunuz. Görebilecek arkadaşlar.
Sorumu Türkçe soracağım. Çekimlerinizde storyboard kullanıyor musunuz? Öncesinden ve o storyboard'a sadık kalıyor musunuz? İkinci sorumda Truman Show eğer kişinin çekseydiniz senaryosu aynı oluyor. O sudan korkmasına Thanks.
The question is, do I use storyboards? Only usually for action scenes, and then I always change them. I really don't work very well with them, but it's kind of always, it doesn't always happen, but I have them. I do my own drawings, which I think are stick figures, but it's better that I do it. What was the second part? Say again.
Sorunuz neydi? İkinci sorunuz?
Truman Show. About the Truman Show, if you made today the script will be the same.
Truman Show wouldn't, I don't think, be made today. Period. The Hollywood's not making that kind of film. It'd be too expensive and not capable of franchise, and so on. The studios wouldn't touch it. Maybe it could be made cheaper somewhere. It's hard to say if I'd change anything. I don't think so. Once you've done it, it's gone. You know, it's just hard to look back and think how I'd... The only time I think you look back and think how you would change something, I found is on one or two films where I didn't get something right, and in one case an ending. And you know that will come back to me on long plane flights sometimes. I'll be sitting there just, you know, watch a movie or you're reading or eating or something, and then there it is. I'm back in the cutting room in my mind. What should we have done? What could we have done differently?
Bu tarafta mı vardı? Yok, peki oradan kısmınız. Ha, pardon. Tamam, oraya geleceğiz. Kenardan size, sonra ortaya vereceğiz.
Merhaba. Aslında sorumu İngilizce soracaktım ama bu kadar çok bazı filmler arasında cesaret edemedim. Paşa paşa mikrofonumu aldım. Öncelikle kendisine...
Where are you? I can't see you.
Şöyle kalkarsanız sizi göreceğim.
Gotcha, yeah.
Tamam, gördüm.
Öncelikle kendisine saygımı belirtmek istiyorum. Benim sorum da Truman Show'la ilgili. Yani filmle ilgili beklentilerin daha yüksek miydi? Çünkü hani benim 3-4 ayda bir koyup tekrar izlediğim bir film, yani ömrü hayatımda da herhalde izleyeceğim en iyi filmlerden bir tanesi olduğunu düşünüyorum. Ben daha iyi algılanması gerektiğini, daha kült filmler arasında mutlaka girmiş olması gerektiğini düşünüyorum. Bununla ilgili tabii sanat veya sinema biraz subjektif bir kavram. Beğenmeyen olabilir. Ama beklentisi daha fazla mıydı? Yani şunu demiş miydi? Evet lan, yani ben yapabileceğim en iyi film yaptım. Yani bununla ilgili artık daha takip bekliyor muydu? Bunu merak ediyorum. Son olarak da DVD'lerimi getirdim. İmzalamasına çocuğumu getiriyorum. Onu da söylüyorum.
Don't do that. You know, yeah. No, my expectations were wonderfully realised. I think I thought the risk was high. The studio thought so too, because Jim Carrey was known for broad comedies. The concept was very hard to pass on to people then. It seems strange now we know what reality shows look like, and we know there are fortunately plenty of them. But in those days, people really would say, before the film came out, friends even, you know, would say, you know, what's the film about? You'd say, and they'd say, no, hang on a second, wait. You're saying people would watch ordinary life? Yeah, you know, that's the concept. What? Every day, 7 days a week, you know, just people, just what for? You know, well, they're selling products on the show. Yeah, I'm not sure really that would work. You know, drama is the basis of, you know, entertainment and so on. So there was this nervousness, and when the publicity started, they sent me out. Very interestingly, they held Jim back because they knew if he went out to do interviews and things, he would rapidly get into a comedy thing with the interviewer. They might say, oh, I loved your Ace Ventura, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then they might say, but you're kind of serious in this film. You know, so they'd have that, you know, sort of feeling that there was something wrong with the film because it wasn't all funny. So they sent me out, and it was a clever idea, I think, initially, and then the trailers and things, but they held Jim back, and they were delighted that the film was well received. Critically, it was really pretty good, but there were outspoken people who said the problem with this film is that it's about nothing, or this could never happen. So it's interesting how few were prophetic about what was just around the corner in terms of reality shows. But you know, it got some prizes, but it got public to it, and I moved on. You know, you just go to another film, and found it a fascinating experience. It was a very interesting film to make. We lived in that little town in Seaside, Florida. It was winter time, or the tail end of winter, and they rent them, but the owners rent those houses. And so the crew, when they came, the cast, were given a big book with all the little houses in it. Which one do you want to live in? You know, oh, I'll go in that one, you know, and this one. And so we were all in those houses, and then they had little restaurants, and we'd have parties, and it was our town to make a movie in, like a big backlot. And now, of course, the house we shot in is the Truman House, and people can rent his house.
Sırada, evet, siz mi yetişebilirsiniz? Şöyle.
I want to ask a long question. You made in every genres, you made movies in every genres, and you are the only one who has succeeded in. You have made noir, mystery noir, and friendship educational movies, and also action adventure movies. And I want to ask your opinion about genre as a lecture, not just as a magazine thing. What I want to know is, you know, especially to take the attention of only producers, generally, even you make small noir movies. Also, you made The Last Days, one of my favorite movies of yours. It gets much more attention than the other genres. It seems like that for me, and in all other directors around the world, they will take their attention with the noir genres. And how do you decide? You also write. You are not just a director. How do you find your own genre while you are making all the different kind of movies? Because you also made romantic comedies, also. And I want to learn your experience about how you define genre, how you look at them, how can you write with different styles.
Well, you know, firstly about genres, you know, French word we're stuck with. I try not to use it in conversation now. I say sometimes that type of picture, or a western, you know, or a noir. I will use noir. But, because I hate to think in categories. I'd like someone to say a really scary film, really creepy film. Have you seen it? Rather than, have you seen that vampire film? Or, you know, it's a vampire genre. The genre is confining, and as a concept. Who knows what it really is? So, firstly, it's not a lot of my thinking. I think in my case, it was a different generation now, from me to you, and from you to another generation. When I was a kid, of course, they were all, as it were, you know, genre pictures. You know, the cowboys. Essentially, it was westerns and a Saturday afternoon. You know, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age, 13, 14. Westerns and gangster movies were mainly what we saw. And horror films, they're the three. So my first film was a sort of horror film. You know, I did mention I love to hammer horror films very much. But I like the whole experience of being frightened. But I think, you know, to some extent, therefore, they're locked more toward childhood. And, you know, maybe that's a way of looking at childhood, you know, that you pass through a series of experiences which have become part of genres. They're dealing with very basic things. But I try when I take on something to not be inhibited by the fact that it is a category. It's very hard, of course, to do anything unself-consciously. And one of the attempts you make in making a film, I think, is, for me, is to be not self-conscious, but to be free of that, and not weighed down by the past. You know, when I drifted into this business, as you picked up from this interview, from acting and writing or whatever, I'd really gone only to the commercial cinema. And I was very young, you know, I was in my early 20s doing short films, and then friends said, "You're going to be a director. You know, you're heading that way. You're going to do a feature film. You should go to the National Film Theatre and look at all the great works. They've got Renoir on next week. Have you seen a Renoir?" I said, "No." "Oh, you should go and see Renoir." "Yeah, I've heard he's great." "Yeah." And then there's John Ford next month. And I decided not to see them, not to look at them, and only go to commercial cinema, because I knew I was going to be inhibited if I saw them. So I waited till I'd made 3 films. That's at the end of the last wave. I took a year off, and I was living in another state with a very good library, and I had my 16mm projector that was pre-video. And for 1 year, just worked my way through their collection from the silent movies, German Expressionists and early Hitchcocks, and the Russians and Griffith, and made my way through, a kind of film course. And I sat there, can you imagine, just in 1 year to take this in? It's what film schools do, I know, but I was overwhelmed, but I wasn't frightened off. I had it. I think, I know what you're doing here. I think I know what you're doing. Or some, of course, a lot. I don't know how you did that, but I think I could work it out a bit. So it was like a painter, I think, when you're starting painting and you go in and copy the masters. I didn't actually go and shoot stuff that way, but I think in my head, I followed their brushstrokes and how they did certain things. So I was not self-conscious in terms of cinema history. Now, there are directors, Scorsese would be the most famous one of them, who somehow could still manage to work in their own way while knowing all of this stuff. But for me, I always like to feel that I was discovering it for the first time, that it wasn't part of the tradition. I think because I sort of want it to be really happening, not a movie. A little piece of life really happening, we just happened to film it. With Master and Commander, it's very much that. It was really like an experience of being in the British Navy down in Mexico, in the tank. They're all living together. It was an extraordinary experience, and the ship was built, and all the sets built exactly with the low ceilings, and no compromise there. And you felt like you were, I said I want to photograph the early 19th century, like we're not, this is how they might have made a film then if they had the camera, and they wanted to do a training film on the ship or something. So you can see I have a very personal relationship with film history that's not the conventional one.
Actually, we don't have much time left, but 2 last questions you have. Buyurun.
Merhaba, önce Türkçe konuşmak istiyorum. Şu şekilde bir şey sormak istiyorum. Düşük bütçeli kısa metraj filmler çekiyorsak eğer, elimizde çok yetenekli oyuncularımız yoksa, senaryomuzun mu ağırlıklı olarak çok iyi olması gerekli, yoksa anlatım tarzımızın farklı olması gerekli?
I think the idea has to be strong. The idea has to be really strong. Take a short film, very roughly shot in 8mm, but the idea of this, you'll know this film, very short, but the idea is so powerful, you can't take your eyes off it. The assassination of President Kennedy. It's in fact badly shot, and there's no close-ups. But the idea, like the Hindenburg balloon disaster, these are such powerful ideas. The balloon coming down, oh my God! The fire, and it's the cameras kind of on. So you've got to try and find a kind of Hindenburg Kennedy idea. That's the ultimate, of course, you don't, find that exactly. But a great idea. A baby locked in the boot of a car, A baby in a hot day in a car is not breathing, and the parents are gone in the supermarket. It happens. Deaths of children in a car. That starts off, that's a fairly cliched thing, but straight away it's not about the script or anything, it's about the situation, what's going to happen to that child? Would he get out of the car? He's banging on the door that's beginning to steam up inside. Then something happens, but you set attention. That's only one type of film. There's many different, thousands of different ways to go. But I think have a strong idea and then write it. But if you just write, I think that's fine maybe for literary forms, but Look at all those early days in America, you know, Max Sennett, it was a fire, let's go, you know, get the actors, we'll make a story up down there. You know, they had a fire. Maybe you need a fire.
Evet, son soruyu alıyoruz. O zaman bu köşeye, bu cenaha gidelim. Şöyle. Sormayan bir arkadaşınız değil mi o? Yoksa sordunuz mu? Tamam, hayır. Buradan çünkü çok görünmüyor.
Hi, huge fan of your work. I think you'll go down history as one of the few directors who doesn't have a bad movie. All your movies are amazing.
I'll stop right now. I don't want to break
That's a lot of my questions. Are you retired now? Because I think Master and Commander is an amazing movie. And I was really hoping for a sequel for that movie. Because of a bunch of books. And it's probably, well, it's your biggest movie. And what was can you tell me some stuff about that movie, how challenging it was, and probably it was very challenging, but how was it, and are you going to maybe a sequel for that movie? Or
about retiring, you know, I think film directors, as long as the health holds out, probably don't retire. I was shared a ferry ride at Venice back in the early 1990s, with a man, an old man next to me. I thought first Italian, but leaning on a cane, fine face, but clearly, I mean, very old. And then I looked again, and I think that's Fred Sinema. I think I read he was coming to the festival, you know, and I said, excuse me, you know, are you Mr. Zinnemann? He said, yes, I am. And I said, oh, my name's Peter Weir, and filmed, yes, I know, I've heard your name. So we spent some time together, had coffees and chatted, and I asked him about films, you know, High Noon or whatever, you know, what was Grace Kelly like, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so he was relaxed enough with me, but I was very careful with crossing the, you know, to get onto a ferry or something because it was a bit frail. And then to my astonishment, he said as we were sitting there at one point with coffee, I don't know that I shall ever make another film. And I looked, I thought, my God, I thought he would have retired years ago. I mean, obviously. So, you know, inside, the director inside of you never ages. Never. And you know, when you think back on your old films, it's not nostalgic. It's not like thinking back to school days, what it was like in your old school or your happy days you had in the holidays or somewhere in the mountains or something. There's no nostalgia because it was too hard and too interesting to ever be nostalgic, too dangerous. It's a quite dangerous, you know, kind of job, really. Emotionally. Master and Commander, you know, yes, it was, of course, an enormously technical side to that picture and a very, very thin story to sell. It was really the experience of being on the ship, in a way, and under fire and sailing, and I just wanted to do it for years. I used to do it as a joke in Hollywood in the earlier 90s, because I'd loved the British naval history of that period. I even bought a sword in London from a shop which sold antique weapons, and I said I want to buy an English captain's sword of the late 18th century. Yes, sir, we have just the thing for you. £600 on this one, you know, it was a fortune. And I bought it, and each time I went to make a movie, I used to unsheath the sword and leave it on my desk and go and make a film. So for a joke, in a way, when a Hollywood types, you know, would say, producer types would say, any kind of film, you know, you're thinking of doing, what would you like to do? You know, and I'd say, I'd love to do something on the British Navy late 18th century. It's a bit, you know, I'd laugh, and they'd say, oh, wow, you know, I don't have anything like that. And one day, there it was. One day, a studio had the Patrick O'Brien books. And I knew them all, you know, so they said, and that guy said to me, Tom Rothman at Fox, he said, I'm not going to pitch you a story, I'm going to give you a gift. And he went out of the room and came back in and he gave me a sword. And he said, I want you to take command. And I said, you don't mean the O'Brien books? And he said, yes. And I said, oh my God, I love them. And so it was a kind of folly on the part of the studio. You know, it's not something, they hope to get sequels out of it. But I think it was made weirdly because of 9/11. I don't know if they'd ever made it without that tragedy. Because after 9/11, they dropped a lot of pictures. All those studios dropped terrorist pictures, and you know, which they had in development for their summer releases. And so they had, they did have an 18th century action film. It was a long way from terrorism. So it by default, I think, came forward in the queue of possible pictures.
Zaman çok hızlı akıyor. Time is just flowing, actually. Wow, I'm really amazed by what you told us here. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm so glad that I met you, that because of very rare combination of you realize your creativity in a tough business environment like Hollywood.
Well, it was Stanley Kubrick was my big inspiration, I think.
Right.
Because he spanned the commercial and the creative, artistic world, I think.
Wow, that's true also. And also I heard that like the Kieślowski, one of
I love Kieślowski. I love Kieślowski.
Yeah, we couldn't come to that part actually. We need another 2 hours or something. So thank you very much for Mithat Alam Film Center and Yamaç Okur having us here. Thank you again. That's a very rare talent and great.
Thank you.